Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Welcome to episode 72 of the Brave New Weed podcast. I'm your host, Joe Dolce. These are high-minded conversations for the post-prohibition era, and we're having a special three-way recording this morning. I'm actually here with my two producers, which happens very rarely. We're seated at one table in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm going to introduce you to Matthew Hendershot.
Back in New York. Thanks, Joe, for having me on the show again.
Alan Seals.
Hi, I'm always in New York.
So we are having appropriately, we're having a three-way here because this episode is about sex.
Yeah.
Sex and cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
Sex and substances, as a matter of fact. And let me just tell you quickly how it began, and then we'll talk about some other things. But it is not often that you meet people who are strangers at a conference, and somebody introduced me to these two folks, and they said, you should talk to them about using cannabis for sex. And I said, why is that? And they said, because they're really interested in talking about it. So Charley and Shelley Wininger are two of our elders. She is a retired RN. He is a psychotherapist and the author of an upcoming book called Listening to Ecstasy. And I said to them, hey, Charley and Shelley, you don't know me, but would you like to have a very intimate conversation about your sex life on a podcast that's heard all over the world? And they said, yes.
As one does.
As one should. As one should. So that's what we're going to be hearing about after we talk about something else, okay? And I also want to tell you that this episode is being brought to you by a fabulous sponsor. It's Summit 420. This is the best cannabis conference that occurs. Okay, it's part of the YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, and it's taking place in San Francisco, April 24 and 25. I just happen to be the MC and one of the producers of this year's event, so I know it's going to be amazing. Okay. So for the last 2 years, 420 Summit has been awarded the best of the best business events in the whole YPO network, which is international. So if you're a YPO member or among the kind of curious in YPO, I urge you to come to San Francisco this year. You're going to hear about amazing cutting-edge technologies as well as research, but you're also going to hear some pretty compelling speakers on topics that include everything like the truth about CBD, how to blend data so that you actually know what's going on with when you're dosing yourselves. And it's also being led off by Ethan Nadelman, who is a guest on our show several times and also started the Drug Policy Alliance. He's going to give the keynote. He's going to talk about something we talk about on this podcast, which is the new war on vaping and how it's eerily reminiscent of the war on drugs, okay, and why it's so crazy that this is happening, okay? So we haven't heard from Ethan in a while. He'll be kicking off this conference. I want to urge you to sign up for it. Sign up for it quickly because these have very limited spaces. You can register for this event at www.ypo.org/summit4202020. Space is limited, so don't delay, and bring along your spouse or your partner, okay? I'm going to be the host, and I look forward to meeting you and making history together this year.
I want to ask you, Joe, how often do you guys think that we're going to encounter 420 puns in 2020? I mean, this technically is this year that all of April will be 420.
420.
So
yeah.
like we're extending the high holiday for the whole month.
The high holiday, yeah, that's a good point.
I'm just curious as to how many people are planning. They're in their war rooms right now, and they're like, all right, we need our own specialized 2020 pun for
Tell us, folks. Send us your puns. Tell us your plans for the entire month of April. Send them in to us. And we'll be sure to read them out.
Yeah, show at bravenewweedcast.com or just hit us up on our social media and give us your 420 puns. And we'll start sharing that stuff. I think that's a fun conversation for us to
tag us in the stories. We'll share that.
We could do it all year long. We'll just do it all year long.
Let's just get through the high holidays. Okay? Wait, speaking of the high holidays, I want to tell you guys that I had a great edible over the weekend.
I did too.
You did too? It was I had these things that came from California, very nice, and they were called Camino. And they were,
yes.
You know Camino?
I do. I recently discovered them on my last trip to California.
The Golden State. Delicious. And really, and they were sour and succulent, actually. They made my saliva really froth.
I had a couple things. I had the wild berry myself.
Did you like it?
I did. It was my favorite between the two, and the other one was watermelon lemonade. The watermelon lemonade on the packaging, it says it's good for bliss. And then Wildberry says it's good for chill.
Well, it wasn't. I can tell you that. That is the last thing I did. I mean, when I went to bed, my mind was not chilling, okay? It was on the rev. I would say it was good for rev. What about you? How did it work for you?
Oh, it totally did what it was supposed to for me. It relaxed me. I wanted it. I wanted a nice couch lock so I could just unwind at the end of the day, and it was very nice. My wife and I each had a chill. And we did. We just chilled and we hung out together and we just cuddled on the couch and we had a nice, relaxing evening.
Aw.
Well, and the Camino gummies are manufactured by Kiva.
Yeah,
correct?
they are. Yeah,
and they make one of my personal favorite edibles, which is their chocolate covered coffee beans.
Yes,
they make a sativa 5 milligram chocolate covered coffee bean, which I am just the biggest fan of. So big ups to Kiva.
Yeah, they work. They work for, they really work great for, speaking of the holidays, they work great for holiday gatherings. Like if you ever have to go visit your family. Yeah. I suggest giving every member at the table a little 5 milligram.
Yeah.
But even if they don't want to partake, and you do, I promise you there's going to be one less argument at that table.
Let me ask you,
everything's going to taste really good too. What?
Something else too that I had was Kikoko Tranquil Tea.
How was that?
It was actually very relaxing. It was for sleep. I got it for my dad, actually, because my dad has Parkinson's and he has trouble sleeping, getting to sleep at night. And he loves tea. Obviously, there's no caffeine in this because it's to help you go to sleep. And it's 5 milligrams of CBN, 3 milligrams THC, and it just relaxes you, puts you to sleep, and it works really, really well.
Wow. Did you try the flavor? What flavor was it?
It was chamomile valerian. Sounds like something out of Game of Thrones.
It really does.
I'm from House Chamomile Valerian.
Nice.
Anyway, I'd love to hear, we're not all over the world. We're not all over the country even. We're just 3 people. And if you guys have any products you think are fantastic or, great value, please let us know. We're happy to talk about them. We're happy to try them if we're in the right place and not get arrested. But we'd love to know. It's a great way of sharing what we encounter. So we all would say Camino gets a lot of points. And the name of the tea again, Alan, was?
The brand is Kikoko, and it's chamomile valerian is the flavor that I had. But they have a bunch of stuff. They have sympathy, sensual, positivity. They have all sorts of different stuff for different effects, it seems. I'm looking at their website.
So they claim anyway. Well,
by the way, this is not a paid endorsement.
This is not a paid endorsement, folks. This is just us sharing our experience with you, okay?
Well, I'm also back in New York for some work and a visit, and I did spend the week upstate in the Catskills in the woods and also had a really delicious gummy. This one was a little bit different. I think this one comes out of Colorado, and it's a company called Incredibles. And this was a peach gummy, 5 milligrams. We were kind of popping them every, 6-8 hours, depending on how the ride was going throughout the course of the weekend. And these were also fantastic, really manageable. It was a good uplifting. We're communing with each other. We're communing with nature. We're cooking food, having a great time. And it really lifted our spirits, had us laughing and giggling about. So again, these great quality products that are available and out there, they obviously affect people differently. Some are uplifting, some are downlifting. So you're just going to have to get out there and try it. But
and start slow.
Yeah.
5 milligrams, a great place to start, folks.
Totally enough. Just enjoy the ride. These were available out of Massachusetts. But I think the company is out of Colorado. So look around Incredibles. And if you want to find more on them online, iloveincredibles.com will show you their entire product listing. Yeah. And I guess they're like an old guard. You were saying that.
When I was reporting Brave New Weed, they were just beginning. The company was just starting. I mean, it was like an outlaw kitchen that they were producing these things in. So they have become mega.
Awesome.
They've become mega. So good for them.
Joe and I will continue to publish every episode of the Brave New Weed podcast for free for you, our listeners. But we could always use your support. If you've got a little extra change rattling around in your pocket, you can cruise over to patreon.com/bravenewweed and become a supporter of the show. Everything that you'd pledge to support helps us to increase the guests that we can have on the show, even eventually the frequency of the show. And we have a great set of rewards out there, including copies of Joe's book, invites to special events that we will do in New York City, all sorts of fun things. So if you're enjoying the podcast and you would like to support us, visit patreon.com/bravenewweed today.
This week's episode is a pretty intimate conversation about cannabis, sex, and aging with two pretty extraordinary elders, Charley and Shelley Wininger. You're probably not going to hear this kind of conversation on CNN. You're certainly not going to hear about it on Fox. But he's 70.
Although that's probably where they should be, because it's their target demographic, right?
I guess. I don't know. He's 70, and he's the author of a new book that will be out this year called Listening to Ecstasy, which you can figure what that's about. He's also a psychotherapist. She's 68 and a retired RN. And listen, they've been married for 20 years. And they told me point blank that their sex life has really never been better. He's having full body orgasms. Amazing. Most men don't say that. And hers are getting more powerful as she ages. At one point in this interview, they even said that they knocked Charley out of bed. So they use a bunch of substances, and this interview will be exploring many substances because we are pro-polysubstance. But they really like cannabis and a little dark chocolate. And they're going to talk about a lot of the secrets that they have learned over the years. And if you go on to our blog and bravenewweed.com, I also posted something called a harm reduction protocol, which is if you are going to use substances that do change the neurochemistry of your brain, it's very useful to take some supplements before, during, and after a journey that will reduce some of the depression or negative feelings you may have following them. Everything in the protocol that I posted online is available in a health food store or on Amazon.
So there's natural supplements about like when you do Molly, you come down and...
When you're using Molly, the serotonin really drops, right?
Yeah.
So you can mitigate that by taking these. I'll list a few. NARALA. I don't know what that is. Magnesium glycinate, vitamin C, and grapeseed extract. Okay, and when you're after the journey, I've always known about this. You take something called 5-HTP, which again sort of changes the way the body produces serotonin. It makes it much nicer, much easier. So anyway, that harm reduction protocol is posted on the Brave New Weed site under this episode 72. That's a very valuable thing, I think. Okay. So in the meantime, let's talk to Shelley and Charley Wininger. So I'm here with Charley and Shelley Wininger. Thank you for joining us on the Brave New Weed podcast, folks.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about cannabis and sex and aging is what we're going to talk about today. These are topics that are interesting to me and to many of our listeners. And I just want to introduce you all to the listeners before we begin. So, Charley, you are a licensed psychoanalyst, and you're also the author of a book that will be out in 2020 called Listening to Ecstasy. Just tell me in one sentence what Listening to Ecstasy is, please.
It's about the transformative power of MDMA and a memoir about our 65 MDMA experiences together and how they've made me a better husband, a better psychotherapist, and has helped both of us with the aging process.
That's great. And Shelley, you are a retired RN. What's your role in this other than the significant other?
Well, it all started by being a woman going through menopause. And we we were kind of sad that our sex life was going to kind of be depleted somewhere. I didn't meet Charley until 2000.
Is this your second? Are you married?
We are married. Yes.
Okay, great. And is this your second marriage?
Yes, for both of us.
Okay, and you met him in 2000.
I met him in
the sex life started declining when?
04, 05?
Yeah, something like that. When I started going through menopause. I went through it at the age of 53. Yeah, so
So look, these are topics that are not often discussed in the mainstream. So that's why we have podcasts, because we get to talk about them freely and openly here. So tell us, so menopause happens, sex life gets to be a bit of a drag or not as interesting or exciting. How did you come across cannabis as a possible antidote to this? And feel free, both of you, to talk to us freely.
Well, when I met Charlie, he told me he was a hippie, had been a hippie during the day. And I started smoking with him.
Had you smoked before?
Maybe 5 times.
Not really.
And I raised children working as a nurse, life was different for me.
Okay.
But I found that it made me more sexual. And what we did actually, I think we added hash to the mix, a little bit of hash. And it made me even more sexual. And we started playing around with it.
So it cured the menopause symptoms.
The symptoms being pain, dryness, discomfort?
No, just low libido.
Low libido.
Yeah.
And Charlie, how about as from the man's perspective here? Has this helped you in any way in terms of libido or desire? I'm talking about cannabis in specific.
You are talking about cannabis.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, when we have sex, generally, the only drug I'm doing is very dark chocolate. And Shelley is the one who's smoking. Because I'm fine. And she is, she turns me on completely and actually more than ever before.
Okay, that's great. So you're not a cannabis user in terms of
I
sex?
use it, but every now and then I'll use it and make love with it. And the only thing I notice is it heightens my sensual pleasure and my orgasms.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So are you guys smoking? Are you eating? What method of ingestion are you using?
Smoking mostly, either vaporizer or regular weed.
A joint?
A joint. Well, actually, no, vaping.
Vaping, okay.
Yeah.
Vaping bud or vaping a canister.
Okay, or oil, yeah.
But what I have found, how it works for me, especially as I've gotten older, it's like a noise-canceling headphone. It blocks out all the bullshit from the day, and from, like, my son called me or my daughter was having problems with the kids and with my grandkids, etc. And it helps me focus on him, on Charlie.
Yes.
And
yourself, no doubt.
Yes. I listen to the music. I listen to my body. I'm feeling Charlie, whatever he's doing. And the love that we have. I don't know we were talking about it. I don't know if I would be as responsive if it were a casual relationship. But because our love is just so deep, it's like whipped cream on top. It's just wonderful.
That's great. I've always thought that it increases, the word I use is receptivity. So and that goes, I like that word because it sort of spans all things, be it sex, be it music, be it food, right? The things that we know that cannabis does, I think it makes us more receptive.
Especially with anything to do with the senses.
Don't you think?
Yes.
How does that work for you, Charlie? Can you be more specific?
Well, I mean, certainly for music, it heightens musical pleasure. Anything to the touch, anything to the taste. And she looks, like I say, even better to me than normal. When if on some good weed, we're having sex, and I feel like I am strolling into the garden of Shelley.
So, Shelley, have you told a lot of people about this? Obviously, you're on a podcast. I know you've done public appearances on it in New York at shows. Do you talk to your peers about this? Do you talk about other women your age? Who do you talk to about how you use cannabis for sex?
Most of my peers... that's a good question.
Thank you.
Because I don't work anymore. So, and I couldn't, when I worked, I could not talk about it to my coworkers.
Okay.
Because
by law or just by
legally,
embarrassment?
No, legally, they could report me. I could lose my license.
Right.
Back in those days.
Still can.
Yeah.
By the way, it's no different today.
Yeah.
Right?
So it was mostly in the psychedelic community. I mean, we went to a concert in Brooklyn, and there were some women. What was it? Disco Biscuits. And I was talking after the concert to some women behind me who were younger. They were in their 30s, and here I am in my 60s. And I don't know how it came about, but we started talking about weed and sex.
I mean, it was a Disco Biscuits concert. Disco Biscuits is
I don't know what they are.
a jam band, fish-like jam band. And Disco Biscuits is actually named after an old term for ecstasy.
Ah, okay.
But we were smoking pot, so, it
And were you taking ecstasy as well?
probably.
We were that night, yes.
Oh, okay.
So that does tend to enhance conversational ability, lots
Yeah.
of conversation, right?
Yes.
So do you guys use let's talk
I
about...
just want to finish that
Go on.
thought
Yes,
because
please. Finish.
You were talking to these women about it, and I was noticing that they started surrounding her in rapt attention. They were all 20-somethings, and they were fascinated by how, as they get older, they don't have to stop. They don't have to stop rocking and rolling, and they don't have to stop smoking, and their sex life can still be as alive as ever.
They don't have to stop rocking and rolling or smoking and screwing.
That's
Is
right.
that what you want to say?
You said it better.
Okay, I don't want you to feel inhibited here. We
Okay.
are an open podcast. Here. We can
Okay. Uh,
say what you want. No advertisers are going to drop because we don't have any advertisers. There's a lot to talk about here. There's cannabis, there's psychedelics. How do you use, so you're smoking, what kind of sex do you find is enhanced with cannabis? For example, I know that I tend to get dry mouth if I'm inhaling. So it takes me a while to sort of get kissing back in order, get up to speed. Does it create any issues for you?
No.
That's good.
The only thing is, sometimes I do have to smoke a little bit more than if I want to just relax. I need to get a little higher.
You need to get higher.
Yeah.
That's what needs to be that's your noise canceling
Yes,
level?
yes. It doesn't mean I'm not present. And it also depends what kind of pot I'm smoking, what kind of weed I'm smoking,
Go on.
whether it be sativa or indica.
What do you notice the difference?
Well, with sativa, even though Charlie's like, oh, sativa's best for sex, I was using sativa, and I was having problems. It wasn't helping. And
Is it making you too anxious?
No, it just wasn't making me as orgasmic.
Oh.
Once I started adding indica, making it like a hybrid, whether it be a vape or vaping a combination of different weed, I became much more receptive and more orgasmic.
Has it changed the quality of your orgasms, and can you describe that?
Not really. It just makes it easier.
Easier.
Well, I'll tell you what I've experienced on this end from her.
Yes.
And this is just, very subjective, and I don't know exactly what she's experiencing, of course, but it seems to me that as she gets older, her orgasms get more intense because that's what it's been like, and more frequent than when we first started almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. More powerful, would you say?
Yeah. The one thing I do find, because these substances are powerful, sometimes after having, I call them orgs, so they're like little orgasms. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll have larger orgasms, but many times, most of the time actually, afterwards, I still have a lot of excess energy inside me. And
This is after I'm done.
after he's finished, I wait a few minutes. Sometimes I'm listening to the music, and I'm like, I'm not finished. and I finish.
You finish.
Well, he helps me.
Yes, you know how to do this.
I
We have
do.
experience doing these things at a certain point in life and age. We
Yeah.
know how to do these things.
Yes, we do. And but those, because they come fairly quickly, and I'm using more stimulation, a strong vibrator, and it's like bam, and my whole body, he can feel it.
A full body orgasm.
Yeah, he can feel it.
Half the times it knocks me out of the bed.
And it's not that the vibrator is, a better lover than Charlie, because when I don't think I could do it unless Charlie helped me, but it just gets that energy out.
If somebody was to come to you and say, look, I'm in my 60s, I want to have better sex with cannabis, what would your recipe be? Either one of you.
Play with different kinds of cannabis, whether indica, sativa, or hybrid, and smoke enough or eat enough, whatever you want to do, where you're high. Start that way, or start low, and then if it doesn't help, just get a little higher.
And music helps.
Oh, God, yeah.
Let's talk about music for a second, because you've now mentioned music, both of you, several times. What's the playlist?
Chill Out 2016. It's 30 trip-hoppy kind of music that I put it on shuffle.
Are we on Spotify? Are we on Pandora? What are we on here?
Well, Pandora, we do trip-hop.
Okay.
But this, I have Amazon Music, so I can download different albums.
This is a plug for Amazon Music. They should be sponsoring
No,
this podcast.
actually,
If
because
any of you will work for Amazon, you should tell them.
No. I'm thinking of switching over because they don't have everything I want. But in the meantime, they have this one album, 30 songs. I shuffle. Sometimes I'll say, I never heard that song before. And because it's just shuffling. And so that,
It's sensual and exotic music.
exotic, erotic, it's edgy. 07 is a group that has some albums, and they're very edgy. And what I do is when I'm listening to the music, I kind of pretend. Well, now we're talking about a little bit of fantasy.
Go for it.
I pretend that I'm in a movie, or in a place, and whatever music I'm hearing, that's what in my mind I'm surrounded by. If it's Eastern, I'm surrounded by colors, from rugs, like in a tent. If it's like a Scottish kind of thing, I'm with a fireplace. It's just helps me set the mood.
So it also sounds like cannabis somehow stimulates your imagination.
Absolutely.
As well as your vagina and other organs. Is that correct?
Yes. And you?
Absolutely. Cannabis is great for, it's notoriously good for creativity, and I used to use it creatively. Now I can access. I write a lot, so I access my creativity and just like I say with dark chocolate. But interestingly, cannabis and dark chocolate are two of the world's most complex, chemically complex foods or substances, I should say. Certainly when I'm high, my imagination runs wild.
They both stimulate the endocannabinoid system. They both have an effect on the endocannabinoid system. I'm not quite clear. I don't think anybody quite knows how they affect it, but it's quite interesting to look at. Is there any particular sexual act that you've been more prone to exploring? Has cannabis opened your how do I want to say it? Your sexual imagination in any way? Are you comfortable talking about this?
Just finding different parts of my body that I know are reactive, but like on my breasts, but even more so. Anything goes. And I will tell you, just to tell you, if we're talking about a combination of psychedelics with pot.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Just standing at a concert over the summer, listening to music, and just moving back and forth, I had an orgasm.
What psychedelic was that?
MDMA and weed.
They go well together. They do go well together. But I want to ask Charlie, do you find that MDMA is a sexual stimulant as a man?
Good question.
Thank you.
It's a double-edged sword.
I think it is too. Tell me.
I find it, frankly, more difficult to get or stay hard on MDMA.
Similar.
But there's something I can take for that, right?
Yes.
So I do that. If we're going to have sex, I will do two things. I'll take a Cialis, and I'll smoke. And both those things will help me stay hard. And also, if I smoke enough, and the MDMA is, if I'm not at the height of the roll, I can come.
Got it. So I went to the MAPS conference this year in New York. I know you were there too. I saw you there. And there's lots of information about MDMA and its ability to increase empathy, right? I mean,
yes.
Obviously, ecstasy, I think you know this, was when it first came out, they called it empathy, but it wasn't really a great brand, right? People didn't really go there. So ecstasy worked much better.
Yeah.
How do you find the connection of empathy and physical pleasure? Let's sort of draw some connections there. They're not necessarily connected.
Well, for us, they are. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like the difference between, the part of Wizard of Oz where all of a sudden they enter Oz and things go from black and white to color?
Yes.
Well, it's sort of like that. So when the MDMA comes on, whether we're smoking or not, it just heightens the intimacy between us, and our kisses are more delicious, and our touch is more remarkable and astonishing, and so it just heightens everything. And that, where the sensuality is heightened, it heightens the heart-to-heart connection.
Yes, I find the same. But so let's talk a little about your book, please, Listening to Ecstasy.
Oh, okay.
If you don't mind. How many trips did you do? 68?
It's called rolling. So about 65 rolls that we have done together.
Over how many years?
Over about 15, 16 years. So it's like 4 or 5 times a year.
And can we talk about what got you going on this?
Shelley. I had given up MDMA by the time I had met her, but she said, she was just out of what, you want to talk about it, or should I? Go ahead. She was just out of a long, hard, difficult marriage, and she wanted to spread her wings. And when she found out that I was interested in psychedelics, she said, I want to try ecstasy. People have told me about it. I want to try this. So I said, oh, all right. And I had given it up. I didn't know about the protocols at the time and how to make it a safe and rewarding journey. So I turned her on and decided to do it again with her. And we learned about hydrating, and keeping ourselves hydrated during the experience. We learned about 5-HTP afterwards we never had what they call the Tuesday blues.
You never did, huh?
Never. And we regulate the dosage. We get a lot of sleep the night of. So we're very careful, and we've followed the protocols. And since then, I mean, it's add icing to our cake.
Yeah, you said that, but it must have added more if you're writing a whole book about it. But before you go there, I want to ask you, what is the correct dosage of 5-HTP to kill those Tuesday blues? How do you make that measurement?
That's a good question. I don't know what it might be for you. For us, we take 200 milligrams the night of, and another 200 milligrams the following night at bedtime.
Not in the morning?
No. We do the night of at bedtime for 2 nights. That's what works for us.
Mm-hmm.
Shelley?
I just wanted to say one thing.
Anything you want.
Something interesting. I have coronary artery disease. I have 6 stents. And when I tell people that, they're like, what? And you take MDMA? And I cleared it with a expert, a physician who's an expert on ecstasy. And this doctor said, just take a beta blocker. MDMA has some amphetamine in it, so it'll speed you. A beta blocker makes your heart go slower. So, and I'm on beta blockers anyway, so I just take an extra one. I've never had a problem.
You've never even had a symptom or anything when we're rolling.
And that's something that people, older people especially with their medical problems, it doesn't mean it's a life sentence of abstinence.
Not necessarily. I mean, some people with some heart problems, you definitely should stay away from it. And if you really have a high blood pressure issue, MDMA will increase your blood pressure slightly. But often the medical community is a little hysterical about things like MDMA, and so. But don't take our word for it. Check with your doctor if you have an issue.
Good warning, right there. Good disclaimer. But let's go back to other things that listening to ecstasy, other topics maybe that you're broaching other than sex.
It really has helped me and both of us, I believe, with the aging process.
I would love to know about that a little bit.
Well, for one thing, when my time comes, I am not going to have too many regrets. I've lived a full life and can continue to live a full life, but MDMA makes it even richer and more complete. And so I know that we are living life to its fullest. So just from an existential point of view, we're choosing to live a very full life that is not in the norm, and gives us 4 or 5 times a year walks in heaven together, and that is an interesting. It's an interesting way to look at it, but it's a way of preparing for one's demise. To know that one has lived fully, and but also it just helps me because it helps with transitions. As I'm transitioning into older age, psychedelics and MDMA in particular, it just helps me be at peace with the changes that are occurring.
I think that's crucially important. I'm thinking about these things a lot now as I begin aging or opening a new narrative. How's that? Okay. And, it's a struggle. It can often be a struggle, especially when you're beginning to sort of recognize, I don't recover as quickly. Right. I don't hear as well, or I may lose my balance. The things that I don't have all those issues, but, for people I know, my parents did, certainly you watch it. Always hits you as a bit of a surprise, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And I'm wondering how, psychedelics. I mean, obviously, I know the studies that have shown that it helps people who are really at end of life deal with end of life stage.
Yes.
People with cancer, and they know they're dying.
Especially,
we just we know we're dying on a different scale,
right?
Basically, on a slower, more gradual, scale, right?
Yes, they're giving in studies, famous Johns Hopkins study over 10 years ago, where they gave psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, to people who are at the end of life, and it helps them face their mortality and quell their anxiety.
Yeah.
And they're giving it to other people who are very mature, who are well, and they're coming back and saying, this was one of the most profound experiences of my life. And they follow up a year later, and they say, that was one of the most profound experiences of my life.
So a lot of doubters would say, you're you're taking psychedelics, which is a complete sign of your craziness. It's obviously gone to your brain and rotted it. I mean, obviously, I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
How do you address that sort of response? Or
There
critique?
is, I would say to that person, if I was exposed to the same drug war information that you've been exposed to all your life without any opposing point of view, I would believe the same thing. There's been a lot of hysteria around that. And around psychedelics. They rot your brain, they burn your spinal fluid, they destroy your chromosomes. All this has been debunked, but the media doesn't follow up with the debunking story. So it gets a bad reputation. It also gets a bad reputation from people who abuse the drug. And, if you abuse MDMA, it will return the favor. If you do too much or if you do it too often, it's going to hurt you. But that's why you have to follow the protocols, as I outline in the book. You should never do more than 120 milligrams at one time. And halfway, 3 hours later, you can do another half of that amount. You've got to stay hydrated, and and 5-HTP and getting the sleep that you need. And after you do it, especially if you're over 40, you shouldn't do it again for at least 4 to 6 weeks.
Do you choose ceremonial occasions? Do you create your own ceremony around them?
Well, let's put it this way. We don't sit around on a Saturday night and with nothing to do and say, gee, why don't we take some whatever? Let's drop some acid. Let's take some mushrooms. We don't do that. Everything is planned. When we go on trips out of the not psychedelic trips, but regular trips.
Yes, like vacations.
Like vacations, we do often do psychedelics. In fact, it wasn't the first. It was probably my third or fourth time doing MDMA. We went to a place in British Columbia called Bouchard Gardens, and it was the most beautiful garden I have ever seen.
I'll bet it was.
And every time when we traveled, we were in Barbados one year, and we went to a botanical garden, couldn't compare. So Bouchard Gardens is like our gold standard. So we're often checking out places to see what can be our next gold standard.
But also, if it's New Year's Eve, sometimes New Year's Eve we'll spend at home, and we will plan an experience around that. This New Year's Eve, we're going to be... Second time in a row, we're going to be celebrating with a few friends and 18,000 people in Madison Square Garden at a Fish concert.
Oh, that's so cute. That's so great. I thought you were going to say 18 friends at an orgy.
That we haven't experienced yet.
No, we haven't.
I'm not sure psychedelics or cannabis lend to that because they are more intimate, inducing experiences, correct?
Yeah.
There's
certainly orgies that occur with MDMA. And
have you been to any?
Well, we did. We didn't have sex with anybody else, but we went into there's a regional burn, a Burning Man light experience called the Philadelphia Experiment, or PEX, and we went into the sex tent at PEX one night, and it kind of blew us away. No pun intended. It was like an extraordinary experience what we saw there, and you'll have to wait for the book to read the details.
Now that's a good tease. Go on.
But let's just say when we entered it, we knew we weren't in Kansas anymore. It was one of the most remarkable experiences of our lives.
And it's still every now and then, I'll get back to it.
In your mind. There's your imagination. In your cannabis-fueled imagination.
Absolutely.
Have either of you had any negative experiences using cannabis with sex? Has it made you overly thinky or overly cautious or overly paranoid?
I do notice that I can get into my head and get lost there when I'm smoking. The way out for me, and this just works for me, I don't know for anyone else, is to get into the body and into my senses. As I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist, and Fritz Perls, who innovated and created Gestalt therapy, said, lose your mind and come to your senses. So with cannabis, if I focus out, if I get out of my head, I'll get into making love to this gorgeous woman. I will get into the music that we're listening to. I'll taste some rich chocolate. Anything sensual helps me get out of my head.
Taking a bath?
Sure, absolutely. Hot bath, hot shower, absolutely.
Sauna on the sea?
Yes.
Swimming in the ocean in the evening?
We once swam. We were on a cruise, and it was freestyle dining. So at dinner time, like 6, 7 o'clock, there was an indoor pool. We were the only ones, and we just had the pool to ourselves, and they had lights and underwater, and it was beautiful.
You had a full amniotic sac experience.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there any other revelations that have occurred to you about cannabis and sex? I mean, you guys go out, you talk about it public. Do you have kids, by the way? Do either of you have children?
I do.
So they obviously know that mom is talking about having sex at the age of 68. What do they say?
Well, they don't know too much about me talking about sex. They do know that I do psychedelics.
Uh-huh.
My daughter actually had a misconception. She thought that I was doing drugs. And I just recently I had
Like all the time.
All the time. I said, I have to tell you, I done LSD once every 2 years. Same with magic mushrooms, once every 2 years. MDMA 4 to 5 times a year, and she smokes more weed than I do. So and I said, and that's it. She said, "Oh, for some reason I thought you did other things." And I'm like, "No."
Well, it is. Look, I think one of the very effective propaganda tools of the drug war is to put all substances in one bucket.
Yes.
Drugs. Right?
Yes.
And make no distinction between them, and
That's
make
right.
no distinction for responsible use versus whatever other kind of use there is. Other people will disagree with me. They'll all say that, all drugs are good and human beings should be able to put whatever they want in their body. I have a slightly different opinion about that because I've seen people go off the deep end
Sure.
on a lot of amphetamines, and it's not always been pretty. Let's
That's
put it
right.
that way. And
That's
I know
right.
enough people who work in substance abuse clinics to know that addiction is one real problem. I think the substances we're talking about here have never been shown to be in any way addictive or physically debilitating.
Right. Everyone draws a line somewhere when it comes to drugs.
But there's another issue. There are people who, to them, what we're doing is almost sacrilegious. They feel that these medicines,
Yeah.
these medicines should be sacred and just used for
Ritual or spiritual enlightenment. Like people who will do ayahuasca or magic mushrooms for spiritual development, and so there are those who on the other side will judge us for using something like like using mushrooms or LSD or MDMA or cannabis for recreational purposes, and I like to say that fun, joy, play, these can be transformative experiences.
I don't take that lightly. I think that's a really important point. Fun is psychologically healthy, I think.
Another thing, when we talk about it with groups, and I say, well, I don't usually set an intention, but what I do is especially if we're out in the park or something, I but I really appreciate nature. I appreciate what we have here on this earth. So even a blade of grass or a little flower I'll see.
Yeah, there's no question.
So even though I say I'm doing it for recreationally, I'm learning. I'm appreciating, and that's important to me also.
I prefer to recreational, which sounds to many ears as trivial.
Frivolous, yeah.
And frivolous. I prefer the word celebrational.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that very much.
Yeah.
So you look at these as celebratory experiences. You make sex a celebratory experience. You make a holiday or a walk through nature as a celebration, yeah?
Yes.
I love that. I think it's really gorgeous. Let's end on that note, Charley and Shelley Wininger. I'm so glad you came by to talk to us on the Brave New Weed podcast. I want to end it, but is there anything else you want to tell us or do you want to discuss? Is there anything we haven't brought up in this rather wide-ranging conversation?
Well, interesting you use that term. I have found that with psychedelics and with cannabis, it's wider ranging. That when I was a younger man, because of what I learned about sex from other guys, I thought that sexual pleasure was really limited to my penis, or just the tip of my penis.
Yeah, that little 1 inch.
That's right. That's right. And so, when you think about it, it's so limiting. And so, what these substances have taught me is that there's a wider area of pleasure, and that my whole body can. I mean, I once or twice in my life had full body orgasms.
Have you really?
Yeah. When using any of these substances, I can experience intense sexual pleasure and orgasm throughout the entire, often through the entire pelvic area, from my belly button down to my knees, like having an orgasm.
Let's end on that note, because really, what could be better? Thanks again, folks. So glad you joined us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, listeners. We are always on the lookout for great things to talk about on the Brave New Weed podcast, and we'd love to hear from you. You can always email us at bravenewweedcast@gmail.com with links to articles, interesting news stories, personal accounts of things that you've done, or leads on books or products that we should know about. You can always contact us at bravenewweedcast@gmail.com.
All right, gentlemen, here we are.
Yeah.
You've just heard that interview.
What a conversation.
What do you think?
I think it's great. I think it's great first and foremost, just from the most base level of people being able to talk about sex. Just in the same way that we have experienced prohibition of cannabis and other substances. By nature, Western society, especially in the United States, has this weird mental prohibition about talking about sex. I think that because so many of us were raised in the church and had this morality beat into us, or abstinence-only education in public schools, we just have this massive shroud of mystery and sort of general ick about talking about sex. And one of the things that I've learned in moving to Germany is that you get away from that moral abuse, I'm going to say, and people are better about talking about sex. People are better about communicating what they like, what they don't like, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Sex positivity is a thing in the world and needs to be a bigger thing, just like talking about cannabis normally and normalizing it. If we can talk about sex normally and have it just be a normal thing that people do, because we all do it, or we all want to do it one way or another. But to bury it and hide it and say, oh, it's dirty and it's immoral and you shouldn't do it because God says, or because, people will talk about you. We got to get past that mentality. And I think it mirrors cannabis prohibition in a lot of ways, to be able to just freely talk about our sex lives.
Thank you, Matt. What do you think, Alan? What struck you?
Well, to comment on that, I want to lump therapy into that.
Absolutely.
Mental health.
Absolutely.
Mental health as well.
100%.
Our culture the generation of 40 and above, like our parents' generation, 50 and above, I guess at this point, just don't want to talk about mental health. It's bury it, hide it, and then it's like, don't enjoy yourself, don't express how you want to feel. And I just like how, there are many things I don't like about millennials, but one of the things I do like about millennials is that they're just like, well, in therapy, let me tell you about what we just talked about.
Yeah.
We're getting to a good point. Anyway, about that interview, it was very, very interesting to me, her comments on menopause, because I've, as a man who has a partner who has not gone through menopause, I don't know much about it. And
it's going to come.
Oh, yes, it will.
I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, of course it will. And for me, like, libidos can change after childbirth, and libidos change obviously during menopause. And so for me, my question was about like whether or not orgasms are affected, and I guess that's an orthogonal conversation to libido. So you can still have powerful orgasms and have things to amplify and sustain that side of your body while doing things. The other conversation is, how do you have the sex drive back to then want to have the orgasms?
And how do you keep the intimacy factor going, right? I mean, that's not easy after 20 years. We all know that. If you don't know it, let me assure you, it's not easy, okay? So I thought that they were very bold and very brave to come on and talk about this. And I'm so glad they did. And I want to remind you all that this episode was brought to you by 420 Summit, which is part of the YPO organization, Young Presidents Org. And they're having a great summit that I will be emceeing in April. You have to be a member of YPO to join. But if you haven't signed up for it, I really would encourage you to come, because it's going to be amazing. And I think we're going to be talking about sex there too, actually. But here's how you do it. You go to www.ypo.org/summit4202020 and sign up. Space is limited. Don't delay. Bring your partner. Bring associates who are members of IPO, and I look forward to meeting you all there again.
Well, and I think a big get and a big thing to look at and note about that conference is the keynote speaker being Ethan Nadelman. Since he has retired from the DPA, we don't get to hear from him as much, and he's just a brilliant mind and a brilliant thinker about drug policy, and to have an opportunity to see him on stage speaking to a forum in such a way, I think it's an opportunity that people shouldn't miss.
Yeah, and I think we'll know more about who else is speaking in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned. We'll be talking about it. They graciously sponsored this podcast, and we couldn't thank them enough. Meanwhile, come back next week. We'll be talking about some more very provocative topics. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.